it sounds like your dog has figured out that they can work the system. Like they've trained you, basically. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack Leader Mentality Podcast. We've got Q&A day today, and we've got some really, really great questions. I'm really excited.
Loving the questions.
Yeah, for sure. But before we get started, I would like to take a moment of silence for our plant behind us. I'm not good at keeping plants.
You're not.
I'm sorry.
This is what, the second, if not third plant
This
that
is
has died
Actually,
in your office?
no, oh my gosh, you're right. It's been 3 plants. Damn. The first one was really small. I should have known then. Couldn't even keep a small plant going. I just forget to open the blinds, so there's no sunlight that comes in here.
Just so you know, I do open the blinds for you.
I know, and then I close them because I'm like, I don't want everybody looking in at me as I'm
I think you
working.
need a fake plant. Stop killing them.
I know.
You just keep killing them.
I don't want a fake plant, though. I feel like a fake plant is just so fake, you know?
All right. Well, you're going to be replacing a plant every month.
I know.
At the rate you're
Or
going.
I'm going to have to do just a better job. Any tips on keeping, like, what's the best plant? Can you guys, okay, please, I'm asking for your help. Please tell me what I should get for the office that is like the easiest plant to keep alive. Like I'm talking watering once a week. You know, I can put that
no
in my
lights.
phone. Yeah, and nocturnal.
What's a plant for dummies?
Damn.
Well, you know, there's like a
That
book for
is a low
dummies,
blow.
you know, but like
Yeah.
a plant for
I'm
dummies.
offended. Wow. The truth comes out here on the podcast.
No,
Damn.
you know what I'm talking about. Like the book for dummies, and it'll be like different
I know.
topics of like how to work a laptop.
I know. We all know now. Anyway, let's get to the questions. I know. I'm sorry, buddy. All right. What do we got? Let's jump into it. Yeah.
I'm excited for these questions.
Me too.
All right. So question 1. I was listening to your latest podcast on Spotify, episode 8, and I had a question regarding letting your dog know you're serious.
Okay.
My question is, I have a Shiba Inu girl, and she's a clever one. I have a leash on her, and I'll put her on place. Sometimes she will walk off, and I'll verbally ask her to get back on. If she doesn't, I get up and she runs back on. Other times, I just get up without the initial warning, and she still makes it back onto place before I'm able to grab the leash. What would your approach be to nip this habit? Do you still follow through and correct her, even if she's on place like she's supposed to be? Thank you both very much in advance.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Here's how I would do it, though. I have like a 3-strike rule, right? So if she does it like 3 times, then after that, I would correct her for sure. Because first of all, Shiba Inus are super. They're smart, and they're like the cats of dogs. And honestly, like I get it, you know, they don't want to do what they don't want to do. So that's, you know, that's a special problem that people with Shibas deal with. However, I've met a lot of dogs that have a similar issue where they play games. I'd say, you know, they kind of found a little loophole where they could get off and get back on, and without getting a correction, because they fix themselves technically. And technically they're correct. However, because they're so smart and because they are manipulating the situation, I'm going to follow through and give them a correction anyway. And just let them know, if you get off the bed, even if you get back on, now there's a correction involved. And I would do that for, I would say, let's just say the next handful of corrections, and see if you get an improvement. And if you do, then you're fine. If they start playing games again, then go back to correcting them even when they fix themselves, and do it for a little bit longer. Let them know that you're being serious. But it's pretty easy fix. Kind of funny because it's fairly common. I've seen a lot of dogs do that.
It's
even
to
to
me
me
too, because it's cute. You're like, damn, you figured it out.
Yeah,
you know,
for
so
sure.
You're like proud of your dog for being so smart, but at the same time, you're like,
yeah. And I mean, I don't know your dog personally too, but I've seen dogs that, you know, they look at it like a game. So I feel bad correcting them, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, I'm not like a monster, but at the same time, you know, my message to the dog is, look, we're not going to play this game all day long where you hop off the bed and then you jump back on and look at me like, oh, you can't do anything. So yeah.
so would you have a verbal cue coming and following through with the leash, or would it be silent and like you see it happening, you just walk up, the dog goes back to place, and you still correct? Like, would there be any type of verbal communication?
I think you know me really well, because that's exactly how I would do it. I wouldn't say anything, but it's not wrong if you did
Like
say
if you're
no
like,
or and then
no.
follow through
Yeah.
anyway. But for me, I think a part of it too is I'm just trying to show the dog, and I'm just trying to stick to the physical communication in that sense, you know. And
But
I'm
I
just
feel
gonna
like,
walk over to them. So, for example, what I would do if they got off the bed, I might not even say anything to them to give them an indication that I'm coming to correct them, and just walk up to them and correct them, and then put them back on. It's possible too, and thanks so much for bringing this up, but it's possible that that warning is basically a warning to them. You say no, and then they run back to the bed. So it's not wrong if you still said no and then corrected them after the fact. But I personally would actually implement a silent
like you don't
correction.
get warnings now.
Yeah. Well, for the time being, yeah. I
Right.
wouldn't necessarily get rid of them entirely.
Right. But in the moment, as you're trying to fix this
Yeah.
problem.
I wouldn't. Yeah, for sure.
And then if I remember correctly, once you've, because we've dealt with that, and once you've corrected the dog, as you correct them, if I recall correctly, you will say place or whatever the command is for that. So
Yeah.
it's like place.
Yeah, I'll remind them, please.
Okay.
So correction, put them back on the bed, or if they're on the bed, in your case, give them a correction and then tell them place as a reminder.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, great question. Thank you. What do we got next?
Okay. Question 2. Longtime social media follower, love the content and have applied a ton of it to the training and the relationship my wife and I have with our 3-year-old Australian Shepherd. Question. She's very well trained, but during times of more freedom, like secluded hikes and playing ball at a safe field, if something distracts her, like a squirrel or someone dropped food on the field, she's off on the scent and the blinders are on. Commands mean absolutely nothing to her in that moment. I want to build more trust and give her a better experience with the freedom through using the e-collar you recommend. Going somewhere to work with a trainer isn't really an option where we live. We, of course, want to have the right understanding of using it properly and the right steps to take from the start. Any insight would be awesome. Thanks for your time, and I hope to hear more on the next question and answer podcast.
Cool. Yeah. So the dog needs training. And when I say that, I mean, that's kind of obvious, but I mean specifically distraction training. So it sounds like everything is good up until that point. But what I would recommend is work with a long line and recreate those scenarios so that you can get good at leash handling and then apply the e-collar. When I work with my clients in the e-collar, I always let them know that the e-collar is an extension of the leash. If your leash handling isn't good and you're not making a point to communicate effectively through the leash, then you really have no business using an e-collar, because you still need to guide and direct your dog after you give them a correction with an e-collar. So what I would do is put them on a long line, start with some easy repetitions of calling them to you and then rewarding them, then letting them get distracted and potentially even planting some food in the field where it is, and allow them to go to it and then call them away from it. And if they don't respond, give them a correction with the leash. A quick pop of the leash, a snap of the leash, and then remind them, come, and go over this a lot with them. I would have a long line dragging on the dog for a little while. And as I allow the dog to go further out than the long line is long, so maybe the long line is 30 feet, let's say, and they're 35 feet ahead of me, right? So there's 5 feet in between me and the long line. If I call the dog, I have just one step or two steps maybe to reach that long line and give a correction. And I'll slowly start to build out. And that's how I'll build trust. I want to make sure that the dog is responding to me. And then from there, I'll add the e-collar. And again, it's just important to make sure that you are able to communicate with the leash well, and then you add the e-collar to that.
Okay, so for hikes, how would you handle that?
Same thing. Have a long line on the dog. Obviously, we can't recreate like when a squirrel or some animal is gonna come into their line of sight, but I would be prepared for it. I would. Then that's part of it too. Again, even in that location, I would want the dog to be used to responding to me because of the handling that I'm providing them. In addition to the rewards too, right? You should certainly be rewarding the dog for coming back to you. But I think a correction is slightly more important with what you're dealing with, because you can reward the dog all day, but if they don't understand that there's a consequence for not coming back, that's the part that's missing. So, but again, long line, super important, and you just have to pay attention to the dog. I've taken lots of dogs on hikes and I work them through the recall, and it's just a lot of repetition before I start letting go of the leash. Like I call them back a lot. Recall becomes a part of our everyday training routine. Every time we're out, we're practicing recall because I want to basically drill it into their mind that I can call them back at any time, and this is the response that I'm looking for. So there's really no getting around the leash work, in my opinion. That's kind of the foundation because if yeah, for many reasons, I think ethically too, it's a good idea to get used to handling leash before you just start giving your dog an e-collar correction.
Yeah. And just a little important note
Sure.
to add there, since, I've been working on recall with Charlie,
Yeah.
to remember, because when I first started, you're always like, back up,
Oh yeah.
tension on the leash, back
Yes,
up.
back up.
So back up when you have that tension on the leash,
Yeah.
helps a lot.
Yeah, it does.
That's
Yeah. No, that
that's
was
my
good.
little. All right.
She's been
So
with me for a while.
all right, question number 3.
All right.
Thank you for sharing your expertise. 2 questions. How long of a long leash do you recommend for training?
It really depends. It really depends because I've used a long line on different dogs for different reasons. Couple reasons why I would recommend a long line. Number one, for practicing the recall. Number two, for practicing like a finish heel, basically. So if your dog is away from you and you want them to come to heel or just come to you, really. Another reason why I would use a long line is for a nervous dog that I'm actually trying to help build confidence and allow them to move away from me and encourage them to move away from me when we're doing behavior modification. And another reason I would use a long line is just to let a dog kind of chill and just have more freedom. And be able to explore the environment a little bit more, and to play with them, to build trust during play. Taking dogs to parks, I'll have them on a long line so I can throw a ball and start to, again, build trust and really establish the foundation of our relationship through play. If I'm using a 6-foot leash, we'll call it a typical training leash, I'll use that to teach basic obedience. And going back, I'll use a long line for more advanced obedience, like creating distance with sit, stay, down, stay, recall, obviously. So, and then I also use a long line for teaching an off leash heel, for example, because I let the long line drag. So that's kind of like the first step towards the off leash part. And then, so going back to the 6-foot leash, I would use that for basic obedience, controlling a new dog around the house, a dog that doesn't really understand anything yet, maybe a 6 to 8-foot leash in the house. And then once the dog becomes a little bit more advanced around the house, I'll put them on a tab leash. So if they're responding well, but need reminders here and there, they're not like running away from me or anything like that, trying to avoid going into a crate, for example, then I'll use a tab leash. And a tab leash is something that you guys can create at home. If you have a spare leash, you can basically measure out from the snap of the leash, or if you're using a slip leash, from where it connects to your dog's neck, basically, and measure out whatever you're comfortable with, 4 inches, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 or 12 inches if you want it that long, and then put a little knot in it at that point, and then cut the remainder of the leash off. And then that's called a tab leash. You can think of it like keeping tabs on your dog. And that's something that I would use mainly for around the house, and then also for more off leash work. Once the dog is a little bit more polished and they're doing well off leash, I'll have that on them just in case I need to give them a correction or reminder or some guidance here and there. But those are pretty much like the 3 main sizes that I'll use, and for those reasons. So great question.
Yeah.
What's the next part?
The next part is our dog will not jump on us, not consistently as we would like, when we come home if we walk in and have treats on us to give. But as soon as we don't, it all falls apart. Do you have strategies for decreasing reinforcement away from food rewards first every time? Or do you need to use food rewards more consistently for longer first before trying to fade, since the response still needs work?
Man, couple things. So I want to just sort of reiterate the question. The dog is still jumping on you when you come home, and they don't jump on you at all when you walk in the door with food in your hand. So do I have any tips for decreasing using food first every time that you walk in the door? Yeah. So there's a couple of things I think that need to be mentioned with this. First of all, if I were in your house and you were telling me this, I would ask you, is there any way that you can have the dog put away when you're not home, because I think that's a really great place to start personally. More of a foundational approach. You know what I'm saying?
Kind of like letting them express that like excitement
Well, just
in
having
having
complete
them.
structure when you
Mm,
come home. So the dog is in the crate. If they're excited, yeah, let them learn to chill. Then even coming out of the crate is going to be a process of calmness, you know, and then the greeting. So you have much more control over that greeting. You can even put a leash on them before they even come out of the crate, right? That would be my best recommendation, to be honest with you. But let's say that that's not an option. The next thing I would say is there any way that you can put a leash or tab leash on the dog? This way, when they jump on you, you can grab the leash. And as far as the minimizing food rewards, it sounds like your dog has figured out that they can work the system. Like they've trained you, basically. And if you don't have food, they jump on you. So in this example, what you're dealing with, the food reward isn't really helping them understand that they're being rewarded for not jumping at all. It's possible that they've jumped on you and then maybe you've given it to them unintentionally, not
like
knowing
bad
what you were
timing.
creating. Yeah, exactly. But I would, in all honesty, I would still use food rewards here and there when you come home, but I would implement a correction. I just think a correction is missing from the process because it just sounds like they figured it out, you know.
Yeah.
And the way that I would correct them just depends on what you have available to you. You know, if you're using a leash, I would say slip leash, you know, grab the collar or the leash portion and then apply pressure. And as soon as they resist, let go. You're just trying to create discomfort and let them know that whenever they jump, that's what they're going to get. They're not going to get any responses from you. If you had, let's say, like a prong collar, I would give a quick pop or snap of the leash. If I didn't have anything on the dog, then for me, something that I do is I stick one or two fingers in, um, what's this part of our neck called? Like right in the center of the collarbone, basically. And I just push in there. And I've done that with some dogs that are really, really jumpy. It's not my preferred way to communicate with dogs, but I'll do that if there's nothing else available to me. And I just kind of press in and I do so to the point where they start to back up. And once they back up off me, then I relax. But yeah, your dog needs a consequence, and I'm not opposed to you continuing to use food. But when you come home, if they don't jump, then they get a piece of food. And but I would also make a point to come home and not have any food, and then give them a correction. And then also, if you don't have food and they don't jump, then you can pet them and say hello to them. So you can use your attention as a reward. Food is great. I love using food, but I also think that this is one of those situations. And just a side note, like I've recommended this to clients. I'll say to them, hey, if your dog's jumping on you, when you come to the door, have some food outside. When you come home, stick that hand out with food, keep them down. You can pet them and then let them eat some of the food. Then the way that I have them fade away is mix up how often you have food, continue to stick that hand out like you have food, and put their attention to your hand, and then you can pet them. And I've never really had anyone contact me and ask me for further details because I usually cover like how to correct them if they choose to go that route. So no one's ever had an issue from that, from my understanding. But that's something else that you could potentially do too, is use like fake it out basically. But honestly, I mean, you just need a correction.
I also, and I'm not saying that, this family is doing this, but I also wonder if there's any type of like verbal communication that's happening when people are coming home and their dogs are jumping. Are you excited? Obviously, you're excited to see your
Yeah,
dog,
for
and
sure.
so is there a lot of like, "Hi, buddy, we're home,"
Yeah,
like sweet talking and hyping them up a little bit more? Um,
that's a great point. Reinforcing it
like,
essentially.
yeah, like I'm curious, is that happening? And if
Mm,
so, obviously
stop.
stop, come home,
Stop.
quiet. We're not acknowledging the dog
Yeah,
for the first few minutes until they've calmed down, and
yeah,
then you can approach them and give them love.
yeah,
I mean, I know it's hard to do
for
because the
sure.
second we come home, I want to give love to our dogs, but that would not work
I
out
mean, I
well
do
after
to
a while.
Brooklyn. She's calm. She's the
Yeah.
calmest of Well, or Charlie now too. Charlie's
Yeah,
actually a
no.
G.
See, like I can't do that with Charlie. If I
Yeah.
came home, I
Oh
was
yeah,
like,
no,
"Oh
Charlie
my
doesn't
gosh,
get any attention, but
Charlie!"
she's a G though. She's quiet
She is,
for a
but
puppy who. What is she like? 4.5 months. She's
Mhm.
quiet. It's pretty great.
but also when we put her in the crate,
Hmm.
there's no like
Yeah,
excited or
no,
sad
yeah. Everything is
departures.
very neutral.
And when we come home, there's no like excitement. It's quiet.
Yep.
And I actually don't even immediately acknowledge her. I don't take her out. I'll wait like 5 minutes before I take her out of the crate just to show her that just because I'm home, it doesn't necessarily mean like it's go time.
Yeah, or even longer. One last tip too: you can ignore the dog completely and see if that helps. But honestly, I think that that's really only effective to or for puppies with puppies. Once dogs have been reinforced, the ignoring jumping can just create more jumping, depending on the dog. So I'm not opposed to you trying that. That is an option. But if that doesn't work, again, I'm just going to go to a correction. So, all right,
Next question.
all right.
I have a golden retriever who loves sticks, balls, has a lot of drive for those things, and I use that for his training. But when a dog is walking near or around him, he growls and shows his teeth with the ball in his mouth. What can I do to stop that?
That's a great question. Um, Here's what I would do. I would see if I can, if you're paying attention to the environment and you can have the ball or stick first before your dog does, see if when they notice the other dog, if you can mark and reward them before they have a chance to show their teeth. If it's only happening when they have that item in their mouth, see if you can touch them to kind of get their attention and be a little playful as soon as they see another dog before they start to show their teeth, or even in the middle of it. Kind of think of it as a redirect, and your message is like, hey, focus on me, don't worry about them. Generally with that, I would really lean on the side of keeping things light and playful. I'm not opposed to potentially correcting that later on, but I'll be honest with you, I would. My question really is, why is the dog doing that? And for whatever, who knows? Maybe it's a form of resource guarding from a distance. They see another dog and they're like, "Hey, stay away from my ball, my stick." It's hard to say. I don't know. That's something that I would definitely want to learn more from you if I was able to speak to you. So, but generally, even if that was the case, I would still want to deliver the same message to the dog. That is like, hey, everything's cool. Focus on me. And for me, growling is a line of communication that a dog uses to let us know or others know that they don't like a situation and that they're not comfortable. Um, and so I respect that. I'm not necessarily a fan of correcting growling and showing teeth, at least not strong corrections. If I see Brooklyn do it, like as an example, she's done that. Dogs get closer and she shows her teeth, and I go, "Shh, Brooklyn, shh," and I kind of shush her. That's the correction. I'm just trying to keep things light, for example, or I might redirect her. Or just say her name, get her to look at me and go, yes, good girl. Because I'm just, again, saying, hey, don't worry about them. Pay attention to me. It's more about, in my opinion, guiding them through that and how they should be handling it rather than like punishing them. I'm not opposed to that if we've done those necessary steps. But that's how I would handle that. And also, if I was able to, I'd like to know a lot more about that situation and like what plays out and how you typically handle it. Because if you've been really strong with your corrections, there could be an association that's been made for whatever reason where you've corrected them because of XYZ. And now whenever they see a dog, they assume that something bad is going to happen. So they tense up, and that's an expression of that.
Well, that actually leads to this person's second question. And that is, my retriever has been growling when getting corrected, and I've been doing it within the correct timing. Regardless of what he does, he runs to his crate because he knows he is in trouble. Not sure what to do. Maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, not to accuse you of any wrongdoing, but it sounds based on that you've been over correcting your dog. Maybe you're just a little too strong, or maybe there's not a lot of clarity in the correction, meaning like your dog doesn't fully understand why. Or another reason is threatening like gestures or body language from you. So an example of that would be, yes, you corrected your dog on time, but you continue to, raise your voice at them and like point at them and again have like some sort of a threatening demeanor about yourself perceived by your dog, right? They're perceiving that as threatening. The way that I would handle that is I would calmly handle the dog. I would correct them and just make them go, let's say, get back on their bed or whatever it is that you're asking them to do, calmly. If they're running into their crate, I would close the crate door and not allow them to run into the crate. If they went into the crate, I wouldn't correct them for that. So maybe, for example, you told them to lay down and they thought they were in trouble and they ran into their crate. I wouldn't correct them for that. I know that it's wrong, technically, right? But the reason why I wouldn't correct them is because going into the crate is usually a good thing if you've trained it right. It's supposed to be a command, essentially. So I would just calmly tell them, hey, come on, come out here, and then very calmly bring them over to where I wanted them to lay down in this example and then put them in a down. I think if I had to guess, I would say your handling might be a little too strong for your dog and I would tone it back a little bit. That's going to be my first take based on my experiences with the way that dogs interact with their owners. Based on the information I have, that's what it sounds like. I would ease up. It's okay to correct them, but tone it down, so just a regular tone, or a no, and then calmly follow through and make them do what it is that you want. And then, yeah, but
Ready?
yeah.
Next question. We've got 2 questions left.
Okay.
Next question. Well, let me rephrase that. We have
Quite a few questions. Next question is a few questions.
And then we have one more question after
rolled
that.
into one.
I have a few questions. Millie is 17 months old. She had had some training at PetSmart. I wasn't totally satisfied with the methods they used. Using some of your methods, I can have her stay in her crate until I'm free to release her. I've always used a harness with her since the day I got her. So you can guess the one problem I have is pulling on the leash. I'm getting a slip lead from Amazon. My question is, how would you suggest the transition from a harness to a slip lead? I'm afraid she may try to pull out of the slip lead. And then when using the slip lead, does it matter how it's worn as far as what side of the dog the lead is looped compared to which side of the dog is walked on?
So the way that I would transition from a harness to a slip lead is take the harness off and then put the slip lead on, but make sure that it's on correctly. Meaning take the little slide or tab and secure it at the bottom that's closest to your dog's neck and make sure the collar portion is fitted at the top of the neck. That little tab prevents the slip leash from opening while the dog is wearing it. If you got a good brand, then that piece will be secure on the leash. If you got an off brand or a cheap brand, then that piece, if it's not already, it's going to be very loose and slide very easily around the leash and your leash will open up. So the transition to, in terms of pressure, would be, for me, I would walk the dog through pressure. For example, I would take food, I would lure them, and when they start coming into my hand, then I apply leash pressure with the slip leash, and I would put that on repeat, let's say 10 times. Then I would transition to pulling on the dog with a little pressure, and then when they come into it, giving them food. And then I would transition to pulling the leash, creating pressure, backing up more, and then reaching into my pocket or food bag. Technically, you should be wearing one, and then rewarding the dog like that. In terms of like teaching them how to walk, that is a whole other list of things to do. But as far as like just getting your dog used to the pressure around their neck and understanding to come into pressure and to yield to pressure, that's how I would do it. I would use a food lure, then leash pressure, then the food reward immediately, then leash pressure, a little bit of distance, walking into leash pressure, and then reaching into your bag and feeding the dog.
And you would do that inside the house, right? Before you take it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you take that practice outside.
Yep. And then, yeah, as far as the side, yes, it does matter. So if your dog is going to walk on the right side of you, when you're facing your dog and you have the slip leash about to put it on them, it would be in the shape of the letter Q, a lowercase q. Okay. when you put it on your dog, if they're going to walk on the left side of you, it should be shaped like the letter P. So the leash is going to go down, and then the loop for the collar is going to look like the letter P. For you guys watching it, the opposite, right? And then the other way that you can tell if it's on correctly is if your dog is on your right side, the leash should come around your dog's neck and exit to you. So it should come to you versus like exiting out from the little loop of the leash and then wrapping around it. And then same thing on the left side. If you have your dog on the left, that leash should come around the dog's neck and then out of that hole to you. And if you put a slip leash on your dog, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about if you stand on either side of them. The leash should come out to you from that hole. And that's important because if you have it reversed and you apply pressure, it doesn't immediately relax the leash. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the last one they got?
The second part to that question is when teaching a new command, should I focus on one command until it's 100% before moving on to the next one?
Not necessarily. Focus on the command until they're, I would say 80% is fine. You know, they don't have to be perfect at it, but focus on one at a time. So for example, if I'm going to teach a new dog 5 new commands, I can do that basically in a couple of days, but I would just train them separately. So I would just do sit, 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 you know, let's say in the morning, then I work on recall, and late morning, then I do down, afternoon, right, as an example, and then I can go back to doing sit, recall, down. So you could do that. You can train multiple behaviors or commands in, let's say, one day, but you just want to train them separately. So they don't have to be really, really good at them. You just need to be very clear about what you're training. I would not early on train sit and down together because they're going to get mismoshed, you know, and that goes for anything too. Place, sit, down, recall, heel. I would just train each one individually, and then you can start to mix them up when they're about 80% each. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. That was a very helpful tip for me too.
Nice.
All right, last question. We have 2 almost 3-year-old Goldens. How difficult, or is it feasible to train both at the same time? Separating them is hard, especially our Luca. He freaks out.
Yeah, so it's very difficult and pretty much impossible to train 2 completely out of control, untrained dogs at the same time.
But what if they are not
Inseparable?
out of control? Like,
Whoa.
it's not saying they're necessarily like out of control. It's just they're trying to train them at the same time.
Well, based on that, Luca freaks out. I would say they're pretty out of control. No offense to Luca. Out of control meaning like they don't listen to anything. That's out of control. It's not slander. It's not offensive.
I'm just saying, you know, for someone maybe who doesn't
For
have
sure.
out of control dogs.
All right, I'll start the question over on behalf of Layla without saying out of control.
Okay.
It's very hard, almost impossible to train 2 dogs who don't know anything at the same time as one person. In your particular situation with Luca freaking out, here's what I would recommend. Find a place in your house where you can tether him, have him on a leash and tether him, and then interact with him or have someone with you interacting with him to kind of like keep him settled. Generally, I recommend teaching the dogs place first because it's an easy stationary behavior where they're not required to stay in any specific position like sit or down. You're able to let them just lay on their bed and you can interact with them. So you can intermittently go back to them and reward them for staying on their bed while you're training the other dog right in front of them. And that's what I would do. I would actually get him used to seeing you train the other dog, but have him there. But again, you'd need to tether him or potentially even crate him. So he's there watching as you're interacting with the other dog while you intermittently go back and again, reward him for being chill. I actually did this with Brooklyn and Logan when I first brought them home, when I first got home from training school. And I remember the first time I ever trained a dog in front of Brooklyn and Logan. At home, they were both freaking out. Not to mention the time that I trained another dog. I trained this dog named Oogie in school with Brooklyn in front of me because Layla came to visit and Brooklyn lost her mind. I didn't even know what to do at the time. I just stopped training the dog and I was like, let's put her away because I was so embarrassed. And I'd never seen her act like that. She did not know what to do with her life. But
Yeah,
so
she's like, you're training somebody else but
yeah,
me?
so I get it. And if that's the case, if he's just freaking out because you're interacting with the other dog and not him, what I would do is give him like a stuffed Kong, give him a bone, give him something to engage with while you're training the other dog in front of him as he's tethered. That unfortunately is pretty much your best option. I wouldn't necessarily recommend like correcting him if he was still upset about that, but rather working him through it. You know, I wouldn't be opposed to giving a correction later on, but up front, I feel like it would not really fair to stress them out like that. If their relationship has been allowed to become what it is to the point where they're unable to be separated, I feel like we should have a little bit of, you know, grace and leniency and understanding with what we've created, you know, and then work them through that. But wouldn't be opposed to saying, okay, knock it off. That's enough later on in that equation, but not up front. But yeah, definitely tether them and get them both used to seeing you train and interact with one while the other one is not doing anything.
Well, since it seems like Luca is the one who is having a harder time with it, would you maybe recommend teaching him place first
Yes,
and
love that.
getting him really proficient in that?
Mhm.
And then once he's learned place, then you're giving him Kong, a chew
Yep.
something, a chew bone, and then he's occupied, and then you're training the other dog.
Yeah,
and
and your other
you keep
dog
going
is
back to Luca to
Yep.
reward him.
And then your other dog would basically be a distraction for Luca among other distractions that you train him through. Just to say like, hey, look, while you're on your bed, I'm going to sit on the couch, open the refrigerator door, open your favorite treat bag. I'm going to open the back door. I'm also going to train your sibling while you watch. That's just a part of the distraction training, and that's how you can treat it. But yeah, great points. Definitely switch up and train Luca first to get him acclimated to being on place, and then the other dog is just a distraction, and then you can swap him out.
And definitely have, here I am, look at me, I'm a trainer.
Yeah.
Just kidding. And definitely have them on leash, both of them. That way, if Luca breaks his place, if you choose to go that route, you can put him back on place.
Really appreciate you guys' questions. I hope I've been able to provide insight to all of you who had a question and to those of you who are watching and listening into all these answers. Don't forget, if you guys do have questions, please email us at info@leadyourpacklv.com. And don't forget to what?
Podcast in the subject field.
Put podcast or podcast questions in the subject field for us. And also, if you're looking to be a leader for your dog, don't forget we have a pack leadership course, and I cover lots and lots of awesome stuff, like how to teach your dog place, how to deal with jumping, garbage rating, counter surfing, teaching your dog boundaries, and how to just be a better pet owner and build a solid relationship with your dog. So check it out. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys, and really looking forward to our upcoming episodes. We'll see you guys
And
then.
more questions from you guys.
Peace.
Bye.